70, which is Lower Richland, Southeast Columbia, and parts of Sumter County.
Good morning. Rita Allison, House District 36 in Greenville and Spartanburg.
Good morning. Terry Alexander, District 59 from Florence and Darlington counties.
Thank you. And I'm Ray Felder. I represent House District 26. With us today, we have Director of Research, Pierce McNair, and we also have our Executive Assistant, Ms. Ginger Lee. Again, I do want to thank everyone for coming today. I know that this summer has been an extremely busy summer for all of us, especially those of us with children and grandchildren. But at this time, we're going to kind of have a discussion about school reopening and other issues. And we're very privileged and honored to have our Superintendent of Education with us today, Molly Spearman.
And I hope you can hear me okay. I want to protect y'all. Is that, if I'm not clear through the mask, let me know and I'll remove that. But good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, members, for inviting me today, and to all the folks who are tuning in to watch this. Thank you for your support and for your creativity, your patience while we move through this pandemic. Our goal is to get every child back in school as soon as possible, because we know that that's where they need to be. But we have to do that safely, and I am committed to that. So I'm very interested in your questions today and giving you the information that you need to serve your constituents back in your communities. You gave me some questions that you wanted to hear about today, and the first one was regarding the student count number of those students that we say are COVID-19 truant, those students that we have not been able to establish any contact with since we closed schools on March 16th. That number, you have the chart. We've been working very, very hard on this with the local districts, and I have to say this is something that I have to depend on the work of the local principals and their superintendents in making sure that they make contact with their students. So that this number was as high at one point in the recent month. It was up at about 16,000. The schools have done a very, very good job of using all their resources, including going themselves to homes, resource officers working with law enforcement, going to homes to check. One person shared with me, they actually went out to the address and the home, which was a camper, was no longer there. And so you can imagine the different circumstances that folks in our public education system find and see. But we are getting there. You can see the chart I'm giving you by district. I have made personal phone calls to superintendents asking them to please work on these numbers. Katie Milgis has really worked awfully hard on this. So our number as of last night, we are down to 4,216 children statewide. And of those, we have submitted 3,724 of those names and contact have now been submitted to DSS, Department of Social Services. So we only have about 492 names of children who have not been submitted yet to DSS. And we are continuing to work. There are a few districts that are continuing to work on their list, or either they have confirmed that those students have moved and are not at their current location. So we're almost there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. But we're working very closely now. What DSS is doing is cross-referencing those names with the children that they have already assigned caseworkers, and asking their caseworkers to go and check on those children as well. And if they're not in their files, to help us also to try and locate those children.
Yeah.
Yes, if you don't mind, Representative Alexander.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Superintendent, for your continuous work in this effort. I know there's a lot of sleepless nights that you might be experiencing, not only you, but all of us who are concerned about our students. This last couple of days, as I was preparing for this, I was wondering about our homeless population. I know particularly in District 1, we have about 500 homeless kids. How are they contacted? Because, you know, they might be staying in a hotel tonight, and then by Friday, they may have moved into another area. And I'm just curious how we are contacting that homeless population.
And you're right, and I think that has been some shocking statistics to some who did not realize the number of homeless students that we do have in South Carolina. They would be handled in the same way as far as using the last contact information that we have, and if we can, you know, if they have moved, to try to track them down. So I actually have a meeting this afternoon just on that number with our staff. We do have a person at the department under the McKinney-Vento Act, which protects the homeless children and ensures that it is our responsibility to ensure that they have an education at the place of their choosing. If they are homeless, as you know, and say they were going to, let's say, South Florence High School, and they are homeless and maybe are in residence in Darlington County, they can be, if they choose to go back to South Florence, we transport them to their school of choice. So it's quite it takes a lot of work, and I'll be happy to, if you want to go and really visit that point, to have our director come and meet with you all. But to my knowledge, it's under the same type of using resource officers going out to the home to try to locate those. But you can imagine how.
Yeah, I know that's a tedious thing.
Katie may have some additional.
I know. Yeah, that was a tedious thing, and it just came into my consciousness. My sister and I helped a lot of them, and we probably sent about 5 homeless kids to college while they were still homeless. And so we was having this conversation, and she asked me about that. I said, that's a good question.
Yeah.
How do you keep up with, you know, if they're moving from one hotel today, don't have any money to pay for that hotel, maybe stay in a car the next night, and then find some money to stay in another hotel. I'm trying to figure out how the district maintains that, and I know that can be just a tedious task.
They do have someone in their district, just like we do at the state, who that is their responsibility, to work with those children specifically. There has to be a McKinney-Vento contact person in each district. If I may, Madam Chairman, Katie Neal just may have a little more information.
Yeah, so it's my understanding too that there's a national database that has all the McKinney-Vento information in there. And so what our office is able to do is to take the same information that was provided to DSS and run it through that database as well. Again, like Superintendent said, that might be, you know, we're not the complete experts on this, but it might be a conversation that you would, you know, enjoy having with our director on that.
I would love to have that conversation soon. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. And as I shared with the Senate 2 weeks ago, I know Richland District 2, and I have verified that again since then, but they have as many as 1,000 homeless students in their district. So it's quite an extraordinary task to serve those students, but our educators do it well, and thank you for what you do, your commitment, and many of them invite these children to come and live with them as well. So it's really an act of love.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. And we have a question from Representative Brawley.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And thank you so much for the extra effort I know that your agency and your staff are doing night and day to try to make sure we are reaching the students across our state and keeping them safe. My question has to do with the number. I'm glad to see the number shrinking. That is a lot of progress with regard to the students who are, as you said, COVID-19 truant. So as I look at the number, I'm trying to discern whether these numbers of students are actually students who you've not heard from, or are you keeping a separate record of students who you have heard from, but they're not completing any assignments? Because I think there are two pots of concern: the students that we've heard nothing from, and students that we know where they are, but they're not being educated because of whatever reason. Some of them are just a lack of virtual equipment for internet access. So are you
Yes,
tracking
exactly,
those students
yes.
as well?
Yes, that information, and to be quite honest with you, that was one of the communication issues we faced with this. Even though we thought we had defined the question very well, we learned that as late, and possibly even some of the numbers that you see on some of these districts that still have higher numbers than most, it may still be mixed up and include some of what you've described, students who have not engaged in their homework or turning in activities, because that's how this question started out. It really was about which students have you not been fully engaged? And so it's morphed into something different. But districts, we are not collecting that final information about homework, but certainly districts do have that, and they have been working with that. And if I might just give a word, just as we are moving into this new now reopening of schools, the experience, the educational experience that we went through from March 16th to the close of the year, I really called emergency learning. You recall, we had to make a decision about attendance. We said attendance all will be counted present, because there were some who were able, through their learning management systems, to have students engage every day. They could take attendance, and certainly there were others that were using pencil paper that could not. That will not be the case when school reopens. Attendance will be taken every day. We've made some tremendous progress over the summer with purchasing. We're involved right now with the bids out on purchasing the licensure for a statewide learning management system that will give all districts the opportunity to take attendance even if students are at home. The expectations will be much higher, that students must be engaged every day. So this won't happen again. This will not happen again, and I'm very, and as I am reviewing the plans, Dr. Mathis and his team helping us, that is one of the things that we are looking at. How are you engaging every student? What is your expectation? But districts have already been told, and they agreed, that attendance will be taken every day, contact will be made, and we will be back to a more normal routine of, if you haven't heard from a child, in fact, if you're 3 days in a row absent, you're considered a truant. And we need to send resource officers out to check, so we will be back in that normal procedure then.
Yeah, I would like to recognize Representative Calhoun has joined us today. Thank you for being here. I know you've shared this earlier, but for the sake of this committee, and we have media presence here, you know, we live in a wonderful state, and, you know, we hear over and over from our governor, it's the people, the people, the people. But out of those people, and they're not just numbers, these are actual homeless children, but what do we now estimate our K through 12 homeless population to be?
I can get you the exact number. I don't have that with me.
Isn't it around 14,000?
Right. Thank you, 12,600
Yeah.
approximately.
I just wanted the committee to understand that when you look at that throughout the state, we make a tremendous effort to bridge that gap. Because these children live in very, very adverse situations. And I know there's a very broad definition of homelessness. To be classified homeless doesn't mean you actually have no physical address. Foster children, other situations count into that homeless.
But thank you for bringing that up. And I think folks need to realize that is spread all over the state of South Carolina. I was humbled by it and shocked when I learned, I never dreamed that we would have homeless children in Saluda County, but we do. And so it's not just an urban issue, it's rural issue as well. And thank you for saying that, because again, a tip of the hat to our educators who do go far beyond the call of duty to meet the needs of those students.
Exactly, and I bring that up to remind us that for those students, many of them, most children go to school to learn, but those 12,600 students, they truly walk in that school door to be loved, to feel they belong.
Yes.
So it's a very important thing, I think, for us to stay cognitive of, that there is still a great need out there. Thank you very much. We'll let you continue.
Okay, wonderful. So the next question you asked me to address is plans for identifying students who are in need of internet access and devices, laptops, and allocating the resources to these students. Please differentiate, if possible, between students with infrastructure needs and those who lack access due to affordability. So thankfully, if there's some good things that have come from the pandemic, one of them I think is this focus that we all have together now on improving broadband internet access to all citizens of South Carolina, not just students in K-12, but in higher ed and all families, because well, I mean, we have moms and dads who need to get online to apply for a job or to apply for their benefits, unemployment benefits. So this has really come to light, and we're making progress. You approved in the CARES Act funding, the big package of money, $20 million. You approved a plan, you approved funding for a broadband plan, $20 million to purchase MiFi's, hotspot devices. The Office of Regulatory Staff has been wonderful to work with, as well as I would say all of the providers, the telecom providers, the large companies, small telephone companies across the state, as well as our co-ops and electric cooperatives. We have been working very, very closely with them. And I'm pleased to tell you that we've made progress. A press release, I believe, went out or is going out today from the Office of Regulatory Staff about online learning, and I think you have a copy of this. It details some of the things, and I don't want to take full credit for this because there's been it's been a real team effort to make all of this happen. But I will say that our folks at the Department of Education have been very, very involved and working with school districts. The real task at hand was to find out who did not have internet access, why, and get their contact information to the right people. So we have done that. We've sent over, I think it's over 400,000 names of students to Office of Regulatory Staff. They are then, and their address information, they are then sending that out to the appropriate providers. Now, the $20 million, initially, that was talked about just buying those hotspot devices, but we quickly learned that is a great thing. And we have, Verizon has 150,000 of those on hand, AT&T has up to 50,000 in their inventory, and those will be going out very, very soon. We have put priority on the highest poverty school districts. They will get first nabs at it. That information is coming in to us now, and we will in turn help ORS get those delivered. The other school districts too will be sending in their information. I think that's due next Friday. The plan, or perhaps maybe it's August, I think it's August the 5th. But in the next 2 weeks or so, all of that contact information will be in and to Office of Regulatory Staff so that they in turn can work with the appropriate provider, either delivering a hotspot, or as we've learned, some families had the line going right in front of their house, the internet access, and they just couldn't afford to hook up. So we clarified that to say that the $20 million can be used, and Senator Alexander and different leadership agreed that that was the intent. So we are now working with families to have them hooked up. One success story is down in Horry County, where their local telephone cooperative there gave access to over 600 families in less than a week, just by the school district getting the right information to them. They cross-referenced it. So we've made tremendous progress. I don't have an exact number for you today, but as we are working, we're going to see a tremendous improvement in the accessibility over the next month as we get prepared for school to start. So, questions on that? I have
Yes,
this
Representative Brawley.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because there are so many households in my district that are rural that have no access at all. And to be honest with you, there are some where there is the possibility for access, but the affordability issue prevents them from being able to have access. So I'm glad to see this progress being made here. The question I have is, I'm looking at some of the criteria for determining who would have eligibility for the hotspots and the devices. Are the devices separate from the hotspots that you are providing? Because in some places there's a twofold problem. There's a lack of internet, and then there's a lack of the device itself. And while some districts have Chromebooks, others don't. And what's the timeline to make certain that this gets pushed out to the student, not to the district, but to the student, so that they're ready whenever the school start date begins?
So there's several different pots of CARES Act funding, as you know, and the one pot, the big $2 billion pot that you all worked on, is providing the accessibility, affordability, or accessibility of the hotspots, and then the big broadband plan and that. The funding that the districts have received, and that's 212 million. Of that, about 194 million goes out to the school districts. That is loaded. Those funds are loaded and into their normal protocol, and they have begun now drawing down that funding. As of Monday, I think it was a little over 15 million that they have drawn down. They have to spend it within 3 days, so that's why some say, well, why haven't they spent it all? Well, there's very strict protocol that they have to follow. But many districts are using those funds to purchase additional devices, Chromebooks, laptops, whatever to use. They could use it also to help families pay if they had to, but obviously there are many needs that they have, so we're trying to balance which is the best fund to use. So there is a large order across the state of Chromebooks, devices. We have been offering our assistance to districts to make sure that they get the best pricing and that we can help. The Department of Administration has been very helpful and at our fingertips to help us with when a vendor says, it's not available, they've offered to help us speed up those orders and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of ordering going on. The plans right now that's one of the things that the LEAP days will be used for as students come into school. You help fund those 5 extra days. This will be one of the activities that would be going on in those first 5 days where students come in for orientation to receive their device, to get their plans, and then obviously other things like we talked about, the assessments, social, emotional, academic assessments. So most of that delivery to the student will happen during those first 5 LEAP days, or at least some type of orientation set up with the district for students.
So I guess then you're saying that by the time we are in the process of actually taking attendance, and that's my fear, that these kids will not have what they need to mark themselves even present, but you don't foresee that to be an issue?
I don't think so. I think I had a wonderful meeting with all the superintendents last Thursday, and we'll get into that. What are the requirements of their reopening plans? But I have told them that I am requiring them to have face-to-face contact with every student, that they must invite all students in. Even if they're looking at a virtual operation, all students need to come in a safe way, very small groups or individual, to meet with a teacher for a variety of activities that need to go on. One of those would be what we're talking about now, the orientation for their devices, but also just to put eyes on them, make sure they're okay, talk with them, do whatever assessments, as you know, are required, academic assessments. So that is a requirement of our reopening plan, that every student is invited to come in. Now, there could be some families who choose not to do that. It will not count against a child during those 5 leap days. And then depending on what the plan is and which plan the family chooses, but attendance will be taken every day. But I can't imagine any child being counted absent because they didn't get their device yet. So.
Just one follow-up question on that. I know that we're prioritizing this based on the poverty level. They get first choice, and then we're going to move down a couple of different other areas. But these devices at ORS, that also extends to colleges and technical schools.
Yes.
So 200,000 devices, that number is quickly consumed. Are we going to have some type of prioritization on either the device or the service arrangement for those districts that
I
are
would
looking
have
at
to-
virtual only?
Yes, I would, Katie, do you have the answer to that? I would have to refer, and let me get back with you. I'm
Okay.
sure there's been a discussion on that on Nanette, Edwards at ORS.
If you would, I'm
I will get some
concerned
inf-
there that we may have some districts that this particular child chooses virtual, but at that point, we've exhausted
Yeah.
the devices that we have.
Right.
So,
Our folks feel pretty confident, and I spoke with them yesterday, and in preparation for this, I'm sorry that I didn't get the exact number, but they feel very confident that we will be able to meet the needs of the students who are out there. But we'll get that exact information,
Well-
how they're prioritizing that. My question to them was, are we getting the information back quick enough with August the 5th as the final deadline? And districts asked for that much time. They said, you know, this is very tedious work in finding out who those families are, turning over the contact information. But it's a pretty quick turnaround once we can get it to the providers, that they can decide. They're the ones who are helping us decide which is the better option
right,
for the families. Because sometimes families just really don't know themselves. So folks are having to advise them on that.
Well, and I really commend the State Department and ORS and our statewide different providers out there, because, you know, early on, that was a big concern that I had. Why use a hotspot when you have capability of connecting to the internet just based on affordability?
Right.
And I know that has to be tedious, because that's actually probably most likely individual addresses to say, do they have it? Is it available? But I commend you for doing that, because I think in the long run, that is a huge savings. And when you have a family of 3 children, they all then have access as well as the parents, so.
And while we're on
Thank
this
you.
subject, because you had asked me to talk with you about needs, future needs, I want to bring to your attention that the funding that we are using is CARES Act funding. One-time money, which is, in fact, the big pot of money has to be spent by December 31st. So that only gives us a couple months of supporting these families. Now, even the Wi-Fi's have a monthly rental fee. So districts, yes, they have their funding that they can use, but there are many, many needs that they are looking at to allocate that money. So this is an issue that I would ask you all to look at when you come back in September. Is the state going to make a commitment to help keep these services going in some way after December 31st?
Thank you. If I could follow up real quick on that. By then, though, we will really have a better handle on how many students and how much money that the General Assembly
Absolutely.
needs to, okay.
Yes, ma'am. We should. We
Okay,
should.
thank you. Yes, Representative Alexander.
Thank you again, and I'm going to go back to that homeless population again, particularly when you're talking about, and thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing that up about homelessness doesn't necessarily mean that you're without a home. Homeless mean that you don't have someplace to call your home, and there are a lot of foster care families, but those are safe environments. I am concerned about those students and those families who go from hotel to hotel, how we're going to address their needs in terms, and I know in terms of providing these assistance here, because if they're living in a hotel, that means that they don't have anything. And I don't want them to fall through the crack. Have you all thought about that? That 12,000 plus, like Madam Chair said, they're not all living in hotels. They just don't have a place they call their home. But what about those that I know of that live from hotel to hotel, week by week, and sometimes day by day from different hotel rooms?
Yes, sir. Well, I think when those children arrive at school, you know, they are cared for, and the intention of the school is to provide for them whatever their needs would be. So as far as having their own Chromebook, laptop, they're going to get those same services, and a discussion will be had with them about, you know, what do you need as far as internet access. But again, let's have a conversation about that. Again, we have a person at the department that's devoted to their care and needs full-time, as well as each district, and she works with each district to make sure the needs of these students are there. But I really appreciate your commitment. But again, those children are, you know, they're not ostracized or because all kids have needs, and really the role of the school is to meet their needs. So I have confidence in them that they're looking at that. But let's talk more, and I hear you, and we'll make a special effort to make sure that nobody's left out.
Thank you. And just one more follow-up on that, and I'm sure the State Department is already considering this, but I know now in our public schools where there is internet access, there are certain controls, if you will, that make sure that certain websites, yes, certain protocols are taken. If we're going to allow hotspots or home internet services that the state is providing out of whichever fund, I think it's very important that we have some type of cyber security, yes, protection, so that these children that have never been exposed to that kind of freedom before are not put in harm's way.
Yes, ma'am. I agree totally, and I believe there is a security protection there. But I couldn't agree with you more.
One more question. When you talked about finances, how much money has been allocated for this particular piece, and it's had to be spent after December? I mean, by December?
Out of the CARES Act funding, the big pot of money that you all,
yes,
looked at, $20 million.
$20 million.
And we believe that is sufficient funding
to take care of
get us going.
From now to December. After December, we are going to have to find some additional monies, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, ongoing,
yes, sir,
monies. Okay. Thank you.
And I believe the total was like 50 million in that, of which 20 million is going to be for actual hotspots or internet individual connectivity, right? But I think we did 50 million under the broadband.
Yes, right. Yeah, I didn't, right. There's, you appropriated in total to education around 200, I think it's around 210 million. Some of it covers the LEAP days, some of it for the summer reading camp, and then the broadband. So it was a large package, but for broadband specifically purchasing the Wi-Fi's or paying for accessibility, it was 20 million. Thank you. Yes. Okay, and my third request was to give you an update on district plans for the start of school to include an overview of the various models being developed by districts. And of course, this has been a very widely publicized issue, and as you know, communities across the state are all having this discussion about how best to get back to school. I appointed a task force called Accelerate Ed. 20-some-odd people were on that. They met 20-some-odd times with hundreds, thousands of comments and input from across the state, as well as we had an additional advisory committee. We worked very closely with DHEC and other health experts. The report is recommendations, and we also said in the report that we would continue to take new information, which we are doing. And as you know, more and more reports are coming out. How effective, I think we're learning every day that face masks, how effective face masks are. So there's new information, and we are trying to be fluid with our report. I have met with superintendents, and Friday was the deadline to have plans in. All districts communicated with us by Friday. There were 35 districts that asked for an extension. And quite honestly, with the governor's press conference last week and the request that all schools open 5 days a week, many communities and school boards decided they needed to go back to the drawing board and talk again. So we have granted those extensions. I think a number of their plans will be coming in this week as school board meetings are being held. Now, in the media, I was watching last night, it says, you know, this district has approved this plan, this plan. Well, sort of. They have approved the plan that they're going to send to the department. Doesn't necessarily mean their plan has been approved by, we have not approved a single plan yet. We are very close to announcing some of the first plans to be approved. We have a team, several teams in the department that are reviewing those plans. They are looking at every aspect. Number one, are the students, do they have a safe plan for return? That's our number one question. Have they thought everything out? Have they done the things they need to do to make sure students are safe if they are coming back in any type of face-to-face instruction? Have they set high expectations? And how are they going to measure the academic achievement of the students? And how is attendance going to be taken? As I mentioned before, things will be different. It will not be the same as it was in March. So much greater expectations from the districts. When I met with the superintendents on Thursday, I told them that even if they are doing an all virtual model, they must, in their plan, invite all students to come back for some face-to-face contact with a teacher. Even those families that choose that they want to go virtual all year, I still want the schools to lay eyes on those children at least once and have a conversation with them for that group. Then you hear of other districts who are saying, well, we're going to, because of the high spread, we're going to go virtual now. To that group, I said very plainly, you must include face-to-face with that model, at least, and call it a hybrid, where children come in at least 1 day a week. So you may be hearing about some districts saying we've approved a plan, but it still has to go through our office, and we will be working, asking questions. We're looking at how are they handling the vulnerable students. What are they doing with their special needs students? So there are many aspects of our review. Dr. David Mathis is in charge of that, and he was very gracious to come today, and I would like for him to speak a little more in detail about where we are and what kind of models we're seeing, and both of us will be glad to answer any questions that you have, if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Please, Dr. Mathis. I love your coordination there, the tie and the mask. Mr. Alexander's going to want to know where that came from.
You'll need to ask my wife. As Superintendent Spearman said, the plans were due Friday the 17th. By noon, we had heard from all the districts. 35 had asked for extensions. To date, as of this morning, 53 districts have turned in a plan, 28 are still under that extension, and as Superintendent Spearman said, a lot of that, most all of those that asked for an extension wanted the opportunity to present to their school boards before they turned in to us. There is one theme, I think, as we start to look at these plans that is very obvious. Districts have put a lot of thought and effort into the work that they are developing. Most all of them had a task force in their communities and input, surveys to parents, and so we see evidence of that. We, for the districts that, as Superintendent Spearman said, a virtual option, for them offering a virtual option, they're developing their own virtual programs that where a student may want to go in and be a part of that all year long. But there must be initial contact and then intermittent contact throughout the year, even with those students. The other is an in-person model, and it could be a hybrid where they may be working off an A-B schedule. There are some districts that are doing an A-B schedule and then a C day where they bring in special populations of kids for certain makeup and those kind of things. So some students would be there on that model 3 days a week. But there is that in-person contact for those students. Under the hybrid model, we see a lot of the AB model. So many days in school, so many days remote. And then we are seeing those who are offering full face-to-face. We're seeing that in the plans at this point as well. The districts were also asked to determine a time frame where they would review those plans as to what they needed to update with communities and when they could move to another model or more face-to-face. So far, districts have a weekly adjustment that they would look at the plans weekly or every 2 weeks and then communicate if there's any changes that they need to make or they can make. Moving more face-to-face is obviously the goal. The other that we are making sure that's in the plan is that we've asked, how can you ensure or how are you establishing the assurance that there's high quality instruction? And with that, regardless of the instructional model, how can you ensure that all students have high quality instruction and broad student services, so that all students have the services that they may need and making sure they can meet all federal and state requirements. So that is overall where we are with the plans. We, as Superintendent Spearman said, we have a team. There's a 6-member team, 3 groups. They're paired up and we're starting to read the plans. It's something that you read and you have to reread. Because as many districts are out there, you have as many different plans that are there. And so with that, that's a quick overview, but I'll be glad to answer any questions.
If you would, please, Dr. Mathis, I'm sure I'll have a couple. Yes, Representative Alexander?
Yes. So, Madam Superintendent and Doctor, you all just mentioned that no school plan has been approved.
Correct.
Okay. You're close. Yeah, I'm just want to get this in my mind because, you know, you're reading all of these various school districts. This is our plan. So the school board has approved it in some instances, but not the State Department.
And they have to, and we're requiring, as part of the continuing
Right.
resolution, you gave me, as state superintendent, the authority to mandate certain requirements or relief. This is
Good.
one that I'm saying that your plan has to be approved by
Good.
Department of Education.
Okay, if there are some changes during the school year, that must be approved by you or the school board, because, I mean, the local school district just arbitrarily say, we don't like that, we're gonna do something else.
Right. As they look to review and if there's any updates, they would update that plan with us for a review of that. Now, I will say there are some districts that had the philosophy of they wanted us to see the plan first and then their districts, but there are others that wanted the board to see it before we did, to lay their eyes on it first.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we hope, in the next day or two, to have an announcement of the first approval of some plans.
Yeah.
As they come in. The team's been working, and so we are, for those who got their plans in some sent them in, earlier to us, so we've had a little more opportunity. So we hope to make an announcement about that in the very near future.
Yeah, because I read somewhere where some school boards have said, this is our plan, but it's really their plan that they're submitting and not necessarily what they're going to be implementing based on you all's decision.
Yes, sir.
And I think that might be kind of confusing to particularly a lot of the teachers, a lot of people in the communities, the whole 9 yards, whereas the school board is saying, this is it, this is what we're going to do. And you all on the other end say, well, we haven't decided that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in honesty, we have had meetings, and we had a lot of discussion last Thursday, all the superintendents, and Dr. Mathis, we spent several hours together. So they have a pretty good notion.
Okay.
It's not going to be a surprise to them,
Right.
but I want you to know, and the public to know, that we are looking at it very closely. Safety, high expectations, the quality of instruction, how attendance will be taken, how they're going to move through the year, how often are they going to evaluate the plan. We don't want you to just say, we're going to do this for the whole year, no matter what. Now, the virtual option that parents may choose may be you've got to choose that for the year, and I think, as I've discussed with districts, if it just absolutely does not work for a child, we believe that they should handle that on a case-by-case basis if there's a family who wants to move back into the face-to-face. But I want you and the public to know that we are taking this very seriously and have very high expectations for what will be offered in the fall to all students, and that it meets the needs of individual communities. It is not a one-size-fits-all, that everybody's doing the same identical thing.
Thank you.
Yes, Representative Brawley.
Thank you. One of the major concerns that I have heard from parents, teachers, bus drivers, anybody involved in education is the safety component. I know that there are some guidelines as to, and I'm looking at what DHEC has put in front of us with regard to what should be happening at the local level as students re-enter the building. Is there any degree of standard that we are espousing to across the state that would let districts know that you need to be here before you consider full integration of 5-day face-to-face? And I'll give you, for example, in some states, they're looking at 5% spread in terms of positivity rate. We are far beyond that number in terms of trying to get there. Some communities may be closer than others. So are you directing them in any way with their plans as to whether or not they should be looking at the percentage of positivity testing rate in their communities?
Yes, we are. That's included in our Accelerate Ed plan. There is a chart and a description of what DHEC and working with us on low spread, medium spread, high spread. That chart has been helpful, but we have also had to add some caveats to it because, as DHEC will tell you, their job is to talk about just the spread of the infectious disease. And as you know, and I know, there are many factors that we all have to take into effect as we make this decision. It has to be very balanced. Yes, the safety, the spread of the disease should be part of the decision, but also the need for students to get back in the classroom, vulnerable populations that we have not been able to deliver services to. So we have to balance all of that. And DHEC recently added a caveat to that chart, and it includes 3 components of the rate, the rate of positive testing, percent positive, per capita, per 100,000 people. If you're over 200 cases at 100,000 people, that's considered high. And have you been trending up stable, or down. Those are the three categories that help you decide. But they have added a statement, which I think has been comforting to school folks, to say this is one indicator. This is one indicator that you need to use. And you know, other groups now, other health experts, the Pediatric Academy came out with a little different recommendations. So I'm balancing that. In fact, I'm going to be making an announcement very soon on our bus capacity and balancing some of the additional information, balancing the fact of just how effective these are. We were saying highly recommend. You may see me moving to something stronger than that. So we're planning to make some additional announcements soon about the protocols. But as for cleaning, we have given guidelines to schools as to how that should be done, how often buses need to be cleaned, the appropriate materials to use. All of that information is out there for the schools to use. And let me tell you, they are reading this and using it. In fact, they probably know it better than I do as to what's in this report. But we have supplied them with all of those resources that come from the CDC, from DHEC, and we are trying to help them get there. Some of the things that they've done, the Charleston School District gave a presentation on Thursday to all their colleagues, and it included the plexiglass that's been added at every table where little children sit, a component around teachers, how they're going to clean. We've purchased the electrostatic type cleaners for every school, you know, we're going to take care of the buses.
Okay.
The department will be doing that. But we've helped them buy, supported them so that they can have the right materials, and we are also looking at training modules that will be uniform, that will train custodians, cafeteria workers. We're in the process of looking at those right now that we will make available to all staff so that we know that there is a uniform level. Now, to be honest with you though, there are some districts I'm concerned about who don't have logistics directors on their staff. So we are working. In fact, we reached out yesterday. I haven't heard back, but there is a group at MUSC that's been helping. I think it's called Back to Business, and they've done some extraordinary work in assisting. So we're reaching out to them to see if they would be able to have the capacity to help some of our smaller districts that may not have the logistics people to go in and review how they've set up their room. And as you know, many districts are pushing their start date back to after Labor Day, which is giving them a little more time to get ready. And I think some of them do need to do extra work. They do need to do extra work. So we are trying to assist. We're looking at actually employing some additional folks to help, because the capacity to do all of this is really bringing a toll on our staff.
One of the, I guess the main concern, or the number one question I get, and I think is a valid one, and that is, if a person tests positive in a school or in a classroom, what happens? Does the school close? Does the class close?
And we get that, and the CDC and DHEC, there is exact protocols for districts on how to handle that, not only in a classroom, school, but also on school bus. So we've handled that. And I'll say to the public, that does not necessarily mean if one teacher in a school becomes infected, or one child, that does not mean that the whole school has to close down, and possibly not even the whole class. Or if one child on a bus, it does not mean the whole bus has been infected. We are going to have very strict protocols on how buses are loaded, and we already have given guidance to the districts on what if a child in seat 5 becomes infected. It depends a lot on how the child has interacted. But if they've gone to their little seat and sat down with their mask on, the whole bus would not have to be quarantined. There would just be those that were immediately close to them. But that kind of direction is in the Accelerate Ed report that the districts have.
Well, I'm pleased that there will be a great deal of flexibility, because there is a lot of fear out there among parents, and rightfully so, about this one issue, safety. You can't learn, none of this other stuff is important if people don't feel safe. So the safety issue and the consistency of there being a standard is essentially important before we mandate that everybody be in a crowded classroom. So
And
I
I
was glad that
think
you
the
had
other-
that flexibility.
Thank you. And the other piece of it that we know now, the importance of keeping the class unit together as small as possible and as together as possible. That's why teachers will be moving from place to place rather than all the class, or that's why they will, if they get to go out to recess, they may go out just that one class. It won't be mixing. We need to, in order that if one person does become infected, there'll be less transmittal. So all of those things, the schools they're on it.
Yes, Chair Lady Allison?
Well, actually, my question got answered during your presentation, but Dr. Mathis and Superintendent, we realize the awesome job you have before you, and we thank you for moving through that in this time that everybody, our teachers, our parents, our communities and all are, of course, very uncertain about what's going to happen. And my question earlier was, our districts out there that have the opportunity to come to you for masks, for all the things that they need, PPE, all that, do you find they are drawing that down? Okay, and that they do have everything that they need to, for the safety of their teachers and their students and their staff and all that is coming back, and that they are drawing that down?
Yes, ma'am. And
Okay.
I know there was a report, I think, even last week that said only, $87,000 had been drawn down. That number could change as I'm speaking.
Sure.
The money is available to them. They go in, we've already approved their plans. They sent to us how they anticipate spending their money, and we approved it, and they can amend that as they go along. But I want to remind everyone, if you hear that number and you think, oh my goodness, why haven't they spent more than 15 million? They got 2 years.
Right.
This fund is different than the big pot, which has got to be spent by December 31st. They've got 2 years to spend this money, a wide array of categories that they can spend it in, and as they spend it, they have to spend it within 3 days. They draw it down, so as they are doing their invoices and the masks arrive, they draw their money down. So, Katie, I don't know if you have, as of Monday, it was 15 million, or 15.7 million as of today. That could change tomorrow, and it will be, because now they are in the actual action of buying stuff. I have not really heard any superintendent say, we cannot open because I don't have enough money. Nobody said that. I think that as we go through that, funding is going to become an issue, because most of these things that we're purchasing are consumable, and we're going to have to keep it going. So
Right.
That's another, if you ask me, how are y'all going to be able to help, I think as you come back, we are going to need some additional reimbursement on some of the things that, the plexiglass, because quite honestly, when everybody saw all that Charleston has done, there were districts who go, ooh,
Right.
I need to do that too. So we're helping them right now do that too. And we're going to have to make sure, but I think they've got funding to cover that, but as we go through this, you're going to probably have to give us some additional reimbursement money.
Great.
And if I could follow up on that, Superintendent, we're talking about the funding. There's also going to be a savings to our districts between what it costs a district to educate virtually child and what it costs a district face-to-face to educate. We also, closed our schoolhouse doors last March. There's got to be some savings there, I would think. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm sure you've asked districts to come back to you and kind of show you where those savings are and how we're going to work funding the difference between virtual education versus face-to-face. So I know that the funding is always, at the end of the day, a very important
Right.
part. But I agree with you, the safety of our students is first and foremost. I know a lot of the calls I've received have been about parents having to make a year-long decision. So I was very glad to hear you say that you feel as if districts will make exceptions to that year-long if there's a change in the family status or possibly a career change of a previously stay-at-home parent who now is going to be an employed parent. So I'd like to be a proponent that I do think districts are going to have to be flexible because none of us know what's going to happen next. And in saying that, and just as Dr. Mathis gets comfortable seated again, are we asking districts for their Plan B? I mean, you submitted your Plan A, we're going to approve it, modify it, whatever, but then what if you have to change your plan and go all virtual?
Right.
Are you prepared? Have you written a plan? Is your staff ready? What if we do contain this virus and that by January we can go 100% face-to-face? I don't
We have
want.
asked districts that question in their plan. If the pandemic were to surge again and they had to make a change, what is that going to be? How will they maneuver through that? How will they be in the process? You know, how will they make those decisions? And the opposite is true as well. I think as we move more face-to-face, they will see as they do their weekly, monthly updates, how they then can move closer face-to-face. We learned a lesson in March when we had to turn on a dime in basically a weekend. And so those lessons, I think, have helped prepare districts for if a surge were to come back, how they would. So we are asking for their updates in their plans.
The best definition of what I've heard was been emergency deployed education is what we did.
Yeah.
So we are going to be much better prepared. But another question for you, because I dealt with this tremendously during that emergency deployed education. For those districts that are looking at virtual options, we had a real problem in the beginning with some of our, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, but Medicaid reimbursable ABA therapies, nurses being able to do telehealth, districts being scared or concerned that if we fund this and we pay for this, we're not eligible for reimbursement because it hasn't been a reimbursable unless it was face-to-face. So we had a lot of concerns. Have we worked those out? Are we going to be okay with those counselors, those behavioral specialists that we're not having face-to-face instruction, so therefore they don't have the opportunity to actually sit face-to-face with that child?
We were hoping to have all of that worked out, but we have some of it worked out. There are still some services that are being provided, and I could get you more detail on those individual services that we are not getting reimbursed for, that we had hoped that, which agency?
DHS, probably.
Yes, DHS. They gave us some waivers, but not all. So we might need your help with that, but I need to give you more details on which one.
Please, please. And also in improving these plans, are we somehow protecting these parents that if it is not deemed reimbursable other than face-to-face, that the district will try to accommodate that face-to-face? Because we have parents out here with these severely special needs children that they've gone without a lot of their services, so they've actually regressed in their growth. And these parents are very concerned that if that school door doesn't open 5 days a week, is their child going to be left out of these valuable resources that allows that family to continue cohesively under one roof? And that's where I have a fear, that if the school plan does not specifically address that, then when that parent calls your office
Right.
saying, you know, little Johnny, he hadn't seen his therapist in 3 weeks because she can't go into the home and she can't meet him at the school, and unless the service is provided at the school, the district doesn't get reimbursed. Are we prepared for that? These children need to know, these families, these
Right.
parents, they need to know that not only have we tried to take care of the 800,000 students, that we spent a little discussion on their child.
So there are 2 ways we're really addressing that. Number one is, we've asked for their response to students with IEPs, and how they will make sure or ensure that the IEP is carried out. That all services that child is entitled to from that IEP is carried out. The second is other special populations, English language learners, any other student in the special population that has accommodations, 504, all of those. How are you addressing those? And at the department, we have somebody from those offices that will read those sections and make sure they meet the letter of the law. The other is, as they're talking about explaining how they will ensure high-quality education, they've got to meet all federal and state requirements. So making sure that those are done. So hopefully we do have that covered. But the other piece is, I think that communicating to parents what those options are.
And I know we're much better prepared, but just, no one really realizes, unless you work for the State Department or you work for a school district, how much other work and paperwork there really is. I have learned so much since March about all of these, and everyone has to be a specialist in this particular IEP or this particular 504. So I appreciate all the effort. But Dr. Mathis, while you're there, one other question for you. You said you gave an extension on the plans? What's the date now for the other 28 plans?
Most of those, I think, will come in this week. It was basically when their next board meeting was.
Okay, I got you. So you're trying to work with the local school board not to have to hold an emergency meeting. I got
Right.
it. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, I wanted to add just one thing about the supplemental services too. We did allocate out of our state agency funds an additional $10 million out to the districts for them to be able to provide the services that they need. And also, we have said to superintendents, the most vulnerable population should be your first priority to get back in face-to-face. And as we spoke to superintendents last week, that was clearly their intention, that in fact, some of them were going to use their leap days in that way and not invite everybody. I said, no, you need to invite everybody back, but they really are looking at getting those students back in. And just to go backwards a bit too, we allowed those services even, I think the earliest was in May, when we started opening things back up, that schools could offer that if the parent agreed and the teacher would agree to come together at the school, they could do those individual services. So we had some going on, but that was not uniform.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but we're pushing that and watching that very carefully, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that was probably one of the loudest rumbles that I felt so useless and helpless, because these families that typically receive these services through the district were now left here with children that they could not manage without those additional services. So thank you for taking that on. Another concern that a lot of people seem to have, and I'm sure my colleagues have had these calls as well, districts that choose the hybrid model, the ABC, the ABCC schedule, where kids are going not 5 days a week, but fewer days. Childcare seems to be the big concern, not only from our parents that work, but from our teachers that are going to be expected to be in a classroom 5 days a week, and they have children. I know a lot of our high schools have early childhood programs. And oftentimes, they pretty much avail themselves to some students or some children that need a place to be. Has the State Department reached out and worked with DSS maybe to see what other options? Have we maybe worked with some, comes to mind for me, like the Boys and Girls Club, if they're not gonna be in a traditional classroom except Monday and Wednesday, could the Boys and Girls Club maybe come in and work with those kids on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday? And we use some of this discretionary money to give those children a place to go.
We did have some calls early on from some of the groups you mentioned, including some churches who had facilities and staff that were willing to do things. We suggested to them that they needed to contact their local school district, but that absolutely, it's a great idea. I'm going up to the upstate tomorrow morning to meet with the executive of a large corporation here in South Carolina to discuss ways that we can make all this work. And I have heard of some businesses also offering some type of activity for their own employees to come to work and bring their children. So there are lots, we've got to be creative with this. So I think your idea, absolutely, we need to be working harder at that. So I'll take that back. But that is an issue, and we, you know, schools
I think it's a
really
serious concern.
It really is.
And when we talk about safety of children, not only do we need to be concerned with them being safe in a classroom, but we need to know where those children are those 2 or 3 days they're not in a classroom.
That's right.
And parents need some option for those children that are too young to stay alone, or possibly an older sibling that's just not prepared for the responsibility of taking care of a younger sibling 9 or 10 hours a day while a parent goes to work.
And I would say, you know, to our media who are here and to the public, folks are saying, what can I do to help? These are areas that we have got to work on where churches, faith communities could step up to the plate and help offer some type of activities to support what schools are doing and not able to cover. And I have had some questions from folks to say, well, what's the difference? Why can't we just do all 5 days a week if they're coming back one day? The difference is in the class size. In order to social distance properly and be safe, it's much safer to have only 7 kids in the classroom or 5 kids versus 20. So that's why your districts are looking at these hybrid situations. But I know that it presents a problem for families. But we need some folks to step up to the plate. I'm meeting with these executives tomorrow, also meeting with the faith community. I believe that's next week, but that's one of the things I had planned to talk with them about. What can they do to assist their community and us? It's to help us with this child care issue.
I'm really worried about what our numbers are going to look like if our children are not in school 5 days a week. Because a child home alone while parents are working is a very scary situation in today's world. I mean, when I was a kid, you drank water out of the water hose, and you know, everybody knew you, and it was a little different world than it is today, where we tend to live in closer communities, and it'll be very readily available, but that 5th grader is home alone every Tuesday and Thursday. So I'm really concerned about that, and that window of time is so very short to make that happen, because we all know to have a child care facility, there's a list of regulations longer than I am tall. So we can't make that happen on a dime. So I am concerned. Another question I have, if I could please, is the State Department, we're going to have some teachers that are just not willing to come back in a classroom for personal health reasons, family health reasons. Do we have a plan for that? Do we have a number for that? Do we know what our options are going to be?
Well, districts are working with their teachers on a case-by-case basis. Some districts have the larger districts have actually had those teachers apply for different type positions rather than an in-class teacher. Some, the virtual teacher are to be, well, or a mentor or tutor, one-on-one tutoring, so they're working with them. There is some coverage, the Federal CARES Act, Family Act, employee leave gives some additional coverage for those teachers who may have those issues, but they are working on a case-by-case. We at the State Department know we have not done that type work because it's very legal and it is a individual case-by-case with their individual districts. But from what I have, my conversations is districts are really bending over backwards to try and accommodate their teaching force.
Do we have any questions?
Madam Chair, you want to go? I just need some clarity. I'm hearing these various plans, and I don't need it for me, but for teachers who might be listening and for teachers who are calling me and for administrators. Are we saying that the condition to open the school is that a teacher must be there every day?
It depends. Here's what we're saying.
Okay, because I think that needs to be cleared,
Right.
because I'm hearing different messages, and they need to be very precise and clear for teachers. Right. Do they have to be there 5 days a week, even though there may be some other options there, as we are suggesting that, those different days of them coming? Is it a condition for them to open the school and teachers be there for 5 days?
There's a variety of models that will be approved. We are asking every district, first of all, to offer at least two options.
Okay.
One, virtual, for those children and those families who do not feel that they can come back. So there's an all virtual model.
Okay, is that virtual, good point. Is that virtual, and I don't mean to cut you off while I'm thinking about it. Is that virtual meaning that the teacher still must go to school, or she could do virtual from home, particularly those teachers who may have some conditions?
It means different models.
Okay.
Some districts have contracted with a virtual service. There are private groups that you can buy a license and you can be a part of their virtual program. Some are, like the larger districts, and really most districts are going to offer their own virtual, where they have their own teachers who did not want to come back, and they are giving them training, and they now will be working virtually with their children. There are some classrooms that the lesson will be recorded, and the students, if they choose virtual, will be watching their regular classroom teacher in the class, synchronous teaching, I believe is what they call it. He or she will be teaching the students in the class, and one child may be at home because they have a health issue watching it. So there are several different types of models, but that will be offered to every family in South Carolina. And if your district doesn't offer something, I'll say to the public, if your district doesn't offer something that suits you, you always have the option. We have at least 3 and maybe more public charter virtual schools that are free. They are public schools. You will get a South Carolina high school diploma, kindergarten through 12th grade. They will give you a computer, and that is available, and you can register in those. If you do that, you will no longer be a student, though, in your own district.
Okay, I'm not trying.
There. So that's that option.
Okay.
And then we're requiring a second option.
Okay.
With some face-to-face.
Right.
Some districts are saying 5 days a week, so obviously those teachers will be in the classroom 5 days a week teaching the same group of children. The reason they're able to do that, and we believe can do it safely, is there are districts, generally it's running about 20%, some as high as 38% of the families who have chosen to go virtual. So now, instead of having 20 kids in the class, if you say 20% of that is down to 16 kids in the class, or higher, so the classroom's getting bigger. And if you take 16 and divide it into 5, you've only got three to four kids coming every day. So some may be doing a hybrid model where the teacher will be there all 5 days a week, but she's only gonna have 3 or 4 kids in the class every day. Or they may, if they're doing, everybody comes every day, 5 days. So it's
Yes and no.
But, so I would say to teachers who are watching,
Right.
we're reviewing these plans, and we're looking at it, can it be safe? Are we keeping the safety of our teachers at an utmost regard? And I will approve plans that, I think there has to be some type of smaller class size there. And with the population of so many going virtual, I think some districts are seeing that they feel that they can offer a small enough group of students in a classroom that the teacher should be safe.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's kind of like yes and no, you know, in some instances, in some cases.
Yes, sir.
One of the presenters and I caught this yesterday, one of the presenters when the vice president was here, I think it was the National Superintendent of the Year, I can't think of the guy's name, but he spoke about confidence, teachers and parents, ma'am? Yeah, national principal of the year, yeah.
Keel Ross, yes, Dr. Ross.
He talked about confidence in the teachers and administrators having confidence in the process. Right now, and he said, he went on to say that with confidence, they'll feel better about their working, their teaching, and their whole 9 yards. And in my mind's eye, I don't see that confidence with our teachers and with our administrators because they're not getting a clear message.
Yes, sir.
That's why I wanted to hear about whether or not 5 days face-to-face is mandatory, you know, for teachers, and if they don't show up, there might be some reprisal against them. You know, so all of those things, and I don't want us, and we've done it to so many degrees, and not us in here, but in general, we made teachers to be bad people now. And I don't want us to give that message. You do whatever we say or you find something else to do.
Right, I would never say that.
I'm not saying that you are, but some of them are getting that message because there is no clarity that when talking to teachers and superintendents throughout the state, there is no clarity there. And I just think that we need to make it as clear as possible that there are other options available. We don't know what's going to work right yet. We really have no clue, you know, and I applaud you all and, for trying to make it work. But I think once we give our teachers and staff confidence that we're supporting them, that we are with them, we want you to come back, but we want you to come back safely. And I think that's a concern. I want them to come back too, but I want them to come back safely with confidence.
We need our teachers. I'm going to be spending even more time talking with them to build their confidence. That's why I've taken the position that I've taken recently, that the number one thing that I'm going to be looking at is I want to ensure their safety and the safety of students. And if we can, because a number of folks have decided to go virtual, that we can get class size down small enough, in a small enough unit, that they can come back and feel safe. And that's how we're looking at these plans.
Okay, well, what about those school districts that do not have the capability to send as many kids back virtually as a Florence 1 or a Greenville? What about those school districts who do not have that capacity?
We're helping them.
Yeah.
Down your way.
I'm just using those as an example.
Florence 4 is purchasing enough devices that they can cover every child. They're using their CARES Act funding, and that's happening all
across
over.
the state.
Yes, sir. So I think we've made progress there.
Okay, good.
We've made progress.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. I think we have one more question for you, and then we're on question number 3, so we're making real progress.
I think this rest will go a little faster.
This is a quick one. I'm looking at the DHEC handout that we got where you're monitoring, the recommendation was to monitor students temperature, and if they had one or more of these particular symptoms, then here's the recommended advice. And I think that that's good. Flexibility will continue to be the key. My question then is, do you know how many schools in our state, public schools, are without a full-time school nurse?
Thank you. That's a nice segue into another one of our needs. The exact number, I'll give you that, because some schools have part-time nurses. Let me,
Right.
Katie will bring up those exact numbers. This is a need. This, as I said, I think maybe even to you all before, there are lots of risk that we have to mitigate, and one of those was having school resource officers, but now we're looking at a health risk, so a school nurse has become even more important. So that is a need, Representative Felder, and we'll give you the exact amount of funding that we may need. And as usual, that's hard to find. It's not just a funding, but it's finding the person. So, Katie, do you have the actual number for me?
It looks like there's 129 schools without a full-time nurse, but that doesn't include the part-time. 129?
That don't have full-time, or they have part-time, at least part-time?
That is, they don't have a nurse.
They don't have a nurse at all?
I think the original number we looked at was around 230 some odd schools that did not have full-time, so it sounds like possibly 139, that'd be about 80 or so schools that may have a part-time nurse. So we'll get you the exact numbers. And some schools are small, and they think a part-time person can cover. Maybe that worked before the pandemic, but I'm not sure that's gonna work now. That everybody needs somebody there who will be in charge of taking temperatures. We have a full-time nurse that we share with DHEC on our staff. Vicki Ladd, she's been working very closely with the nurse supervisors across the state to have our nurses prepared to know what to do, how to do it, when. And we are also working with DHEC to see if they will get to a place where our nurses would actually be able to give the COVID test and have the equipment and all that they need to be able to actually do the test. We're not quite there yet, but we are investigating that, which I think would be a good idea, but we're not quite there yet, but we do have discussions going on to see about making that.
I would almost classify having a full-time nurse at every school as a critical need.
I agree.
Particularly given where we are with the numbers that we're seeing and the expectation even of eventually getting back to 5 days a week without a full-time nurse in every school.
It's critical.
It's critical.
It is. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Madam Chair?
Following up on that, thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on that, is the case that they don't have them, the funding and or that they can't find a nurse? Is both of those?
I think it's probably both of those.
Both of those?
I think it's both of those. Some districts have put this as a top priority to have a full-time nurse in every school. I think everybody would like to, but there's some who could not afford it. And obviously it's hard to find folks too, so it's probably both of those, but funding is an issue. So I think that on my list of things that we need help on, that's one of them.
One more follow-up.
Yes.
Yeah. And I missed it when you talked about the resource officers. Speak on that again, please.
I just said that, in society, we have different risks that we have to mitigate, and we try to mitigate the security risk by having a school resource officer in every school with the active shooters and things that we've dealt with over the last decade or two. But now we've really moved to a different kind of security, and it's a health security.
Yeah.
So the need for a school nurse in every school has risen.
Yeah, because we probably have resource officers in all of our schools, even before the pandemic, a large portion of them. But we never really had nurses in all of our schools. So I guess now we're having to reshift our priorities, and I hope that a nurse will supersede that of a resource officer or police, as I like to call them, because they come dressed like a police, not a resource officer. So I hope that our priorities will shift in that regard, and focus on, as we went after resource officers, let us also go after nurses for the health care of everybody that's responsible for teaching our children and keeping everybody safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more question while we're dealing with school plans, and then we're moving on to number 4. But on the school plan, I'm sure, and I apologize, I've never seen the template, so I don't know, but how are schools going to handle the related arts, like band, chorus, or, I mean, that's difficult to do virtually.
Right.
Even though we do get a virtual credit for PE, but that's a whole nother subject for another day. But are we looking at that in school plans?
Yes, so all of the core subjects, all of the offerings have to be there. So that should be included in their daily activity. So nothing is exempt from that.
But we are looking at the waiving the required minutes, because with social distancing, it may not be possible for the school, particularly an elementary school, to give, is it 40 minutes a week? 40 minutes a week of music. They may be able to own, because of scheduling smaller classes, they may be able to get 30 minutes or whatever. So I'm taking that into consideration and giving them waivers there. We want the children to have those experiences, but being common sense to make it work into the school day, if they have to alter that time, I think that's something that we should waive and work with them on.
Thank you very much. Yes, Madam Chair.
We have been asked on numerous occasions about limited liability for schools, for teachers, whatever. And we've looked at that for businesses. That's going on the federal level, the discussion and that kind of thing. Do you hear much about that?
We've had some questions, and I may turn to an attorney to answer that. And I do know that at least one school district, I found through the media, that they were looking at having parents sign some type of liability exchange if they agree that they wanted their children to come back. So we leave most of those legal questions to the school districts working with their own legal counsel for them to decide how they write their policies, what they choose, and working with School Boards Association. So Katie, have I answered that correctly? Do you have anything to add to that?
I would, echo that, and just as long as, they're following the protocols of the safety measures, then technically, legally, they should be fine, yeah. But as the superintendent said, to work with their local districts, to get that figured out.
We appreciate that. Moving to question number 4.
Well, we've talked some about teachers, faculty returning. Districts, I don't have a number, but certainly the districts are all surveying their individual faculty to find out who's coming back, who can come back. I don't know, Ryan Brown's here with communication. Do you have any estimate? We really do not collect that information. That's done as far as the districts right now working, and as they get a little closer, we can probably give you that at some point, but right now I just do not have that number.
Can you share with me, and this is probably worked out, but I know now with the different situation our country's under, in the past we've had a lot of international teachers that come in and teach in certain areas of our state. With this pandemic, is that going to be a problem? Those teachers that left to go back to their home, are they going to have work visas to come back to the United States, or are we going to try to open school missing a couple of hundred teachers?
Yeah.
Depends on how the Trump administration handles this new immigration policy.
Right. Really, we're waiting to see how the Trump administration handles this. And you're right, it could impact some teachers from being able to come back to the United States. and some may have to leave, but that is something, that's a federal issue with the United States State Department, that, and we'll be complying with that. It could really impact a few of our districts, that substantially, as you know, we have a few districts that have as high as 25 to 30% of their teaching force are international. So that has not been, to my knowledge, it is not settled. But you're right, it could be a huge impact.
If you would just kind
We'll
of,
keep you
that is on
posted.
my radar, because
Yes.
most of those teachers are science and math teachers in some critical areas of our state. And I'm really concerned as to how many of them will want to come back, if that program's even going to be available to come back. And then what do we need to do within the next month to recruit replacement teachers or assist those districts in recruiting replacement teachers? So, yes, Representative
Madam
Alexander.
Superintendent, do you know the percentage of those teachers, not the ones coming back that we had in the past
sir.
year? What's that percentage of foreign teachers we had in the state?
We had about 1,100 teachers. But I have that broken down for you by district. I don't have
Okay.
that with me today, but I can certainly show you that.
Okay, about 1,100
I
statewide?
think there were, that's correct, about 1,100. Most districts are below 10, 2, 3%. I believe we had 13 districts that were over 10% of their teaching force, and you can guess, most of those are rural
Yeah.
districts, and the highest was up to 30%. Have been working with those districts over the last 2 years that not increase. My original request to them was to get it down below 10%, and they were working toward that goal in not renewing contracts and really trying to pull it down. And so we had not increased any since, I have been working with them over the last couple of years, but it still just became almost out of necessity that they had no applicants. But they had not been, I had asked them not to increase the percentage numbers and to cut those back. So they have been working on that.
Yeah,
But we can give
Yeah,
you
well,
that.
personally, I don't have any problem with them, particularly those teachers at the elementary school level, because they are exposing kids to a different culture, a different language, a different dialect. And I think that's always good when you're exposed to something like that. In high school, my concern might be a little different, but in elementary school, I think it may be a good thing. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Lady Allison.
Following up on that, I know that at one point, and our group visited one of our high schools that had 32% of their faculty was from another nation and that kind of thing. In the plans that are being sent to you, will these districts be addressing that? That I know that this is a federal decision, and I heard that loud and clear. But if we have districts that are going to be tremendously impacted by teachers that will not be returning, that probably would be something that they would have in their plan, would it not?
Well, we'll need to go back and look at that.
Yeah.
We had not asked that question of them in the template that we've sent out, in the information that they're sending us. And to be honest, it really has not risen up, and by now I should have been hearing about that from
Right.
certain districts, if that was going to really be an issue with them. I'm hoping that the fact that we're offering a virtual option and that they're 25% of students are not coming, but that's going to help them be able to manage it. But let us go back and have a conversation with districts and see where that is, because we had not asked about individual teacher force issues. We
Right.
had not asked that in our plan.
When I heard you speak to a few minutes ago that maybe there might be some plans out there that we're going to use contracted with companies that would come in and do online. What happens to our teachers in that case? Do the teachers provide that online, or does the actual contracted company do all of that? And what happens to a teacher
I'll have to see if they made some arrangements of, if some of their own teachers are used in that service. I'd have to check on that. I do not know.
Okay.
But we can check on that. There are 2 or 3 districts. Dr. Mathis, do you know? And I know for us, and I spoke yesterday with the Charter Alliance, all the charter schools in the state, and of course the virtual school folks were there, and their enrollment is way up.
Sure.
And they said that they're getting a lot of applications from traditional classroom teachers now to become virtual teachers. So, you know, there are additional jobs out there, and there is a need for more virtual teachers. But as far as that relationship, I'll have to check on that. And I don't know that we have that many districts who are doing that. Most of them are offering their own virtual program within
Right.
their own teaching force.
Yes, I see or hear a lot of talk about the virtual academies that are being set up, which sound like a really great opportunity both for the teacher as well as for the student.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, shall we move on? Let's talk a little bit about the formative assessments district will use to assist teachers in determining student benchmarks, and that is an activity that will go on during those 5 LEAP days. There are some concerns, and Dr. Mathis had planned to talk about this. I know that we don't want to overtest our children, particularly in those 5 days. And David, I'll just go ahead and bring this up, and then you ask him the questions. But particularly, we've got an issue, and we need your help on this in kindergarten. Yes. Because kindergarten students have to take the KRA. By statute, they also have to take MTSS, the screener. And now in the continuing resolution legislation, it called for a pre-test and post-test for all students pre-K through 9, which we are doing, and we'll talk to you about that using formative assessments and all. But we really think that's a little much to ask of kindergarten children to have to do all of that, and we need to work with you to get your input on if we could not do one of those, let KRA count or the MTS count as a pre-assessment, because that's 3 different tests we'd be giving the child in those very early first few days, and whether or not all of those are really necessary. If we could substitute one, we'd like to work with you on that. David, you may have some other information on it, but he'll cover all the assessments for you.
So with the formative assessments, there are 5 that the State Department has approved for the pre and post requirement in is it Act 142? MAP, STAR, iReady, TE21, and HMH, which is Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. There's a math and reading inventory. Those are the 5 that most districts use, and MAP and STAR are probably the most popular. We selected those 5 because we can get historical data. We have the data when we give the pre and post, but we can also have historical data. So we felt it was important, if for those especially had they used something as a formative, to have that historical data perspective on that. So those assessments can be given during LEAP days for K through 8. Or if a district wants to bring in 9 through 12 or, on their own dime, they can do that as well. But, or in the legislation, it calls during the first 2 weeks of school. So if it's not done during LEAP, that pre-assessment can be given. If it's not during LEAP, it can be given the first 2 weeks of school. But then the post-assessment needs to be given, same assessment that you choose for pre, must be given as post, and that would be given in December 2020. So you've got a pre and a post. But Superintendent Spearman brings up a point that is, I think is a little bit concerning for, if you just put it into perspective of the perch of a kindergarten teacher or a kindergarten student, on the pre-assessment, during that time, during LEAP or the first 2 weeks of school, they've got to take the KRA, they've got to take one of these formative assessments, and they have to take the MTSS screener. So that's 3 assessments for that one teacher and child during that time. So we're looking to see if there's a way that we can get the best information but not over-test as well. So that's become a little bit of a,
Can I ask, does the KRA get us where we need to be by itself? Because I know they're already doing that now. In fact, I stopped by the other day and it was going on and the little ones had their mask on and they were so cute. But does that get us where we need to go without doing the other?
So the legislation would, calls for the post. So KRA is usually not given as a post. It's a readiness assessment.
Right,
So we are reaching out to John Hopkins, the vendor for that, to see if it, what
if it
what we could
fulfills
use-
those,
right, and
The
I guess
need.
it's how we would interpret the results. It does give a scale score, so you could see the administration in August or September, and then again in December. And if that's the case, I would recommend ELA and math in that administration. But there's not an easy answer in that, because we're trying to measure that growth, and so that's difficult. But we're looking for options of what we can do for that.
and with those options, then you're gonna bring those to the General Assembly in September? Or,
It might be too late.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
That's the issue. I think the intention was good, but we probably didn't.
Sure.
Think about the impact on this particular group of children
No,
and
and
teacher.
I-
We want beginning information, ending information. And yet KRA is really our readiness. So we just need to talk with you all to see, I think under the continuing resolution, that state superintendent may have the authority to intervene. But I certainly want to talk with you all and get your feedback on which, and make sure we're in agreement.
Right.
That this is a problem and that we ought to come up with a solution. We've discussed it, we can talk with you about the suggestion on it, but there's no real easy answer unless, Johns Hopkins comes through and tells us. The problem is with KRA, as he said, is readiness. It doesn't really show growth if you give it again.
Right.
Or we need to have some assistance in knowing how to measure that growth.
Yeah.
Because if a child does perfect on it, then you can't be perfect, you can't show that growth. So that's the concern there. But that's an issue that we appreciate your input and talking with staff and others about how best to resolve this.
So,
Yes, Representative
and thank you
Alexander.
very much. So we're recommending, or you have at this point, suggesting that these schools just get 5 assessments, you're saying?
They have an option, they pick one of those.
They pick one of those, they put one of those 5. Okay.
that are
Okay.
approved. And that's for first grade through 9.
Okay.
And we're okay with those children, but it's the kindergarten children, I think, because they already, by statute, are supposed to do a readiness, and we need that information, a readiness
Right.
information. And we've added the MTSS screener, which is very important. And that may be one that we could put
Because
off.
I'm thinking,
It's
I'm
kinda
thinking.
how I'm leaning, but
Yeah.
we need to have that discussion.
Because I'm thinking now with the newness of how we are educating, there should be a newness in how we assess them. And we should not go back and use the same tools, model, process that we did 6 months ago. I think it's a great opportunity for the State Department, for South Carolina, to look at that assessment and see what is really, really needed.
Right.
And how we are cooperating at it and how we are moving that forward, because in the past, we know we took a lot of assessments, spent a lot of money on assessments, and it does not enhance the quality of education because of the fact that they were receiving the data to make the adjustments, as we've had this conversation before, to make the adjustments they need. So I'm hoping now that us as legislators and you as educators can somehow look at how we are assessed and look at whether or not we need to do all this assessing to make sure that we provide our kids with a quality education. And I just think it's a good time, a good opportunity for us to look at it. Maybe just scratch some of them and say, okay, this is what we think we ought to be doing because of safety reasons, because of time, and because of how we are processing this whole new engagement of student and teacher and parents relationship. So I'm hoping we'll consider that and remove some of those assessments and some of those regulations that we have on the book. And we want to talk about that at some point in time too.
I think that's a conversation that educators would like to have, and I know teachers across this state would like for us to have that conversation and involve them because they play a huge role
Right.
in this, and I agree with you, sir.
So how will we do the assessments on those virtual students?
Some of the assessments can be given virtually.
Yeah.
But that is something also that we are looking at with the districts to make sure that they are done properly. So it may be that those students will have to come in to the classroom for the assessments in order to get a very valid and reliable result. Because obviously there's some issues there. If you're giving a test, you don't know who's sitting around to help. So
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
It has to be
Yeah.
very controlled.
Yeah.
But we've talked about that may be something that the districts will have to bring the students in for.
That could be interesting.
We have Representative Brawley has a question, and then we'll get with Chair Lady Allison.
More of a comment, and that is, you mentioned the flexibility that we'd given in the CR and the continuing resolution. And it was my understanding that that was exactly the purpose of that particular component, to give you the flexibility to make those kinds of decisions without having to come back to the General Assembly. Because you're saying, and it's absolutely right, September is too late. So if there is a way that you can accommodate the requirement at the federal level, request waivers, whatever you need to do, I think you have the flexibility within the CR to do what you think is best for the students without having to come back to us, because that particular section of the CR was very specifically worded to give you specifically that type of flexibility, because sometimes the wheels don't turn quickly in the General Assembly. And we know that September, if we were even looking at an August start date, would have been too late.
Right.
So I would suggest that whatever waiver you need to seek, if you need one at the federal level, that's done, and that you all select what assessments to the minimum amount possible need to be given in order to move forward without coming back to the General Assembly.
And my staff and our legal folks have said that to me. The requirement for this additional pre and post assessment was in Act 142, which came a little bit after the continuing resolution. So that's why I want to be sure to have a discussion with you all. I do believe will make that decision, but I wanted to bring it to your attention and give you all an opportunity to talk with me about what you think's best. But
Well, certainly, I think
agree.
we would support the decision that you would make
Thank you.
in the best interest of children.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Chair Lady Allison.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask, we actually have a provision to not do state testing in the coming year. We also asked for a waiver with the feds. Have we heard back from that waiver?
No, we have not.
We have not.
We've sent the request.
Right.
I will tell you that and we've also we have to go through a public comment period also. We've made plans for that. I'm not real optimistic that we will receive the waiver. There are 2 other states who have been denied the waiver on the federal test. I think the position that the U.S. Department of Education seems to be taking is that, we really do need to do these tests. We need this information, and it's too early to say. Let's see kind of what happens. So the momentum seems to be building with my colleagues across the country. There's a debate about it, but there's a good debate going on, and I think there are more states who will be asking for the waiver. But so we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm not real optimistic that we're going to get that waiver right away. In fact, it was denied for 2 states.
We're a long way away from the spring.
Yeah.
We've got a huge mountain to climb here. Okay, any other questions, or can we move? We'll move
And
on.
Dr. Mathis, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and answer this real quickly. I think I've got this information regarding the standards that will be used in English language arts and mathematics. Dr. Mathis pulled a team together, and at the request of teachers and our instructional folks across the districts, they ask us to do a priority of standards. You know, we have a lot of standards, but so that work has been completed, and it is being entered into our new LMS so that when teachers get this, they will be able to know which standards are set as the priority. All of them are important, but these are the foundational, some people call them foundational, so that work has been done. Any additional?
Other than that, we're putting those out for feedback to a committee of school and instructional leaders. So it prioritizes the ELA and math standards. The Superintendent Spearman said all standards are important. So the others are support standards. When you think about priority standards, it's those that you need to know well, you need to go deep in those because they're the ones that take you to the next level. In addition to the standards being prioritized, we are developed learning progressions. So how students, so we identify the priority standards, the support standards, and how a student progresses through learning, and that he deepens the learning where he is, and that it prepares him for what's next. So my wife always tells me less is more. And so I think as we emphasize on the priority and do those well, I think teachers will be very clear. It'll be a great tool for them to have.
And we are planning special training for teachers as they come back to school so that they will know how to use this and go to that information.
If I can make a plug just real quickly, Accelerate Ed, this was a huge conversation in several of your meetings there. Dr. Dixon, I think, really drove that home. That
She did.
we can't do everything, but what we can do, let's do it very well. So thank you for that.
We heard her and others, and we've done what they've asked. And included them in that decision also, I would say. They're some of the ones who assisted us in deciding which ones would be priority.
Yeah. Let me echo, Doc, you're right. Most of our wives are smarter than us, and they are right when they say less is sometimes better. And I'm hoping again, as we move into this new era of learning and teaching, that we try to put as less stress on our students, on our teachers, on our administrators, on you all, so that we can maximize the time that these kids are going to be sitting in this classroom. I just can't understand how they're going to just go back and be like they were in March. That's not going to happen. So our thinking in terms of those assessments and those standards, it's a good time that we go back and take a look at those standards and see what is crucial for this time moving forward. See what's crucial, see what's important, see what's best, and see what is less, so that our students can achieve the most out of the time that they're going to have in front of those teachers.
That's great advice. Thank you, sir. Shall we move on to the next? Number 7, specific state regulations and statutes department intends to waive. And if there's anything, Katie has a list. I'll just mention a couple things. One, and I should have said it a little earlier when we talked about the teaching force. We really need to look at the cap on retirement, the earnings limitation. It would be extremely helpful to districts if that would be lifted, because believe it or not, there are retirees who want to come back and help us. We need them. We need them not only as teachers, we need them as bus drivers, we need them as cafeteria workers, we need them as tutors, whatever we need anybody we can get our hands on, but there's some who are so limited because of that earnings cap. So I would ask you to please consider lifting that. It was done for employees at DHEC, which actually gives us gives us flexibility to hire people, but that's only good to the end of September. So we need you all to look at that when you come back. That would be a tremendous help, and that is something I hear from all superintendents asking for that assistance. So that is definitely one we need you all to look at. The school nurse, I've talked about that. There may be a few things on transportation that I'll be waiving and would need your support on. That is a real factor in schools right now as to how they can get back to 5 days a week. I plan to have some announcements on that soon about bus capacity. I think I mentioned to you earlier. There are also buses that are sitting in lots that may be activity buses. Some of them are equipped with what we call stop the traffic, the arms, the lights, and looking at allowing those to be used. Some of that are things that I will be able to waive in continuing resolution. However, I think there is some debate about, I've been asked by some General Assembly members, well, how long do your waivers last? Is it only good to you all come back and I don't have that authority anymore? I hope you would consider continuing that authority, but there are waivers that I need to give for the full year. For instance, seat time is a big one, meaning anybody that's doing virtual does not have their body in a seat at school, so that waiver has to be given for the entire year, and I will be giving that. But there has been some questions from some members about, well, how long do your waivers last? So I hope that you would continue with that authority when you come back so that I can work through these very things that you mentioned that come up along the way that can't wait till you get back in session. So I would ask. We're not coming back. I wish I could, I understand. But so there are things like that that are going to be coming up that we have to be nimble and use. We will need some carry forward on some funding that we'll need you to consider, and we will provide you with a specific list and give that to Pierce. So those are the things that I know of now. Are there others that I've forgotten to mention, Katie? I think that's the list we have now, but there could be some other things that come up. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll move on to, I'm going to skip number 8 and go to how schools deal with attendance if students attend class virtually. I spoke with the School Boards Association this week, and normally on attendance, we only ask for information when children are absent. That's how it's plugged into Power School, and we want to keep it that way as much as we can. But we realize with this new model now of a child who really is coming to school a day or two a week, maybe home virtually. So we have asked the School Boards Association if they will send a best practice policy out to school districts for them to adopt as to how they're going to manage virtual attendance, and then we will work with them. But we have guidance that is a draft document right now that we're getting ready to send out to districts. But I want to be sure that we're working very closely with the School Boards Association on that policy. Again, the expectation, though, attendance will be taken every day, and there has to be some type of communication going on with the student if they are at home virtually in order for them to be counted present. But the exact wording of that policy will be based on those school boards adopting their own policy as to what their expectations will be.
I have one question, if I could, please, Superintendent. We were talking about the transportation. I realize what an issue and what a nightmare that's going to be. But I've had a couple of people reach out to me that if a district's choosing to go all virtual, then why are the buses going to sit there?
Right.
So why can't other districts use those buses?
Sure.
Because the school buses are not owned by the district. They're actually owned by the State Department. So I would encourage the State Department to reach out as you're reviewing these plans. If they're not going to use their buses or a portion of their bus fleet, but another district could use those, then perhaps we need to share those resources to make sure that we are transporting as many children as we can, as safely as we can.
It's a great suggestion, and our transportation is one of the reasons why it really is good to have a state system, because our folks at the department can manage that movement of buses as needed, but it's a great point. Now, I will tell you, we haven't really talked about this, and as you know, school districts did a miraculous job in feeding students since March 16th. I'm guessing we're probably up to 21, 22 million meals served. I know we're over 20 million meals not only prepared but delivered. And so a question the districts have been asking, what about virtual? Is the intention for us to continue feeding those students? And the answer is yes. So they will be operating, and they are working now as to how they're going to deliver that. There may still be buses taking meals out to needy students who are decided to be virtual, or parents may come and pick those up. So districts are working with that. So there is, even though, not as many buses would be needed for that, but there are bus transportation needs even if a district were all virtual, with that. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about the cost. I want to say this, though. Yes, you're right. There's some savings. You're not operating your buildings, and so heating and air and those kind of expenses. But again, the major cost is teacher salaries, 90%. So, those costs will be there. But you're right. There could be some savings. They buy licensures, some of them. But, it's not quite it's not a real, it's cut and dry as you might think about the difference in virtual savings versus, but it's a great point you made earlier.
Well, currently in the state funding, Superintendent, there's a huge difference in how much the General Assembly pays for a virtual school student versus how much the General Assembly appropriates for a student 5 days a week sitting in a classroom. If I'm not mistaken, that's a big gap in money. Mm-hmm. So I guess, and now is probably not the time because you're overworked to the point, but at some point we're going to have to look at this and we're going to have to allocate, where do we go forward? If we're going to continue a virtual option for students for the entire year, should we allocate that funding a little differently? Based upon which type of student do we have? Do we have a 5-day-a-week student? Do we have a 2-day-a-week student? A 1-day-a-week student? Or a totally virtual student? Because, in any business model that we look at, we want to make sure that we're giving you an appropriate amount of money to educate a child, but we also want to make sure that we get the best results for those dollars.
Sure, absolutely.
I could see opening up that can of worms could be very, very dangerous. Because the taxpayer is going to say it doesn't take as much. And where do we draw that line? Taxpayers say, well, it doesn't take that much to educate a virtual student versus face-to-face, and how we are going to divide that up. If we're going to cut the cost to give it to the superintendents, then I can almost assure you they're going to be a group of people say, well, cut my taxes. And we don't want to go down that road. Right. That's just my thing. I don't think we want to go down that road. But I hear what you're saying, Madam Chair, but I can see that coming into play.
Yeah. Give us, it has, yes, it has. Right, and, okay.
Excuse me, Representative Brawley has a question?
Yes, ma'am.
It has to do with the attendance, because you mentioned that. And I know typically there is the concern of parents about truancy. Legal things happen to both parents and to children who are habitually truant, or maybe even just truant to a point of no response. Is that going to be still left up at the district level to discern what truancy impacts the family legally? Because certain times when students don't show up to school, their visits from, could be law enforcement, to actually apprehend the student and put them in a juvenile center. So I just want to know, how stringent are we going to be when it comes to truancy or attendance connected to truancy? Is that still a district area?
Well, the state definition of truancy is 3 unexcused absences, consecutive unexcused absences. Senators did question me about this when I was before them 2 weeks ago, so we are looking at that. But as where we are today, attendance will be taken, and the instructions to districts would be to do some type of intervention if there's a child who does not participate or engage within 3 days. So there's no plan to change that. I think there should be, and they realize that they have to look at it maybe a little differently and seek out what's going on, but there's no plan to change that definition of truancy. But we were asked to look at it. In fact, some of the senators want to get together and talk about it. They were a little bit surprised. Some were surprised when I told them there were 70,000 truants last year, and those are individual students. But others felt like, I'm surprised it's not more when you say 3 consecutive absences, but it's 3 unexcused absences, and that's pretty broad. There are a lot of ways you can get an excused absence. So that conversation has begun. The definition is a state definition, so it could be changed, but we don't have any plans at this moment to change that until we have a big discussion with you all. Okay, so I think I've already answered what will happen if schools start back face-to-face and a student or teacher is determined to have COVID. That's in our protocols, and you can see that. And the last, I'll go back then to number 8 and make that the last question. Any other information the department wishes to share with the committee? I think we're done. I think we're done. But we're available. You got my phone number. Y'all, this has really been something. It has really been something to deal with, and I texted with the chair lady last night. I just try to get up every day and do the right thing. Yeah. And that's, and I make some people upset with no matter what I do, but I'm trying to do, none of us know. Only the good Lord knows exactly what's the best thing to do here. And I bow to that, but I try to make the best decision and support the districts because I know how hard they are working, and we are working with them. There are some requirements that I'm adding to them, and they so far have been very amenable to add those, and we'll continue with that. But my goal is to put eyes on every student in South Carolina during this reopening, that we have a chance to talk with them all, assess them, talk with them. For those who want to go virtual and not come back, even those, I want them to see them sometime. And for others, I want them to be in school at least 1 day a week, even if the other 4 days they're home doing their virtual work. And I applaud the districts who feel like they can get back 5 days a week. If they can do that safely, we're going to be watching them very carefully. I should have said this, though. Right now, we have about 3,000 students who are going face-to-face to summer school across the state. There'll be more. About 3,000 started 2 weeks ago on July 6th. It seems to be going very well. Very small classes. It's a great model for us to look at. Very small classes. Children are so happy to be back. They're wearing their little mask without anybody saying anything to them. They have been so obedient. It has been very heartwarming. Some parents cried with tears of joy when they dropped their children off. I understand. Some cried because they were nervous, and we certainly are. But we have others. We are anticipating somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 students attending face-to-face. There are others that are attending virtually, and the districts are paying for that on their own. The state is funding this. So this is a great model. And I think hopefully that will alleviate some fears of teachers, and we're learning from that of how to operate. But again, it is a very small class size with very strict social distancing, and children are wearing masks. So I think, I hope it's going to work well, and we won't have transmittal of the disease. And if it is, it will be very small and handled appropriately by the protocols.
Yes, Representative
Yeah,
Alexander?
That was, I'm glad you asked that, because that was a question I wanted to know how the summer school was going on. Thank you for answering that. And let me thank you again, first of all, for coming here and getting all these questions thrown at you and your staff. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and what you're attempting to do to make everyone feel good about themselves and good about the environment in which they're going back to work in. There's going to be some strange times, and I'm hoping again, in my mind's eye, that the State Department of Education, as well as us as legislators who are going to be requiring you to do certain things, consider that we're in a new day, in a new time, and what worked in February is not going to work in September. And I'm hoping that those of us in the General Assembly, I'm hoping that somehow, and this is a question maybe for this committee and for and our speaker as well, what are we proposing to do with this information when we get back in September? It'll be too late to recommend, you know, some of the things that you are suggesting. It'll be too late to waiver. And I think Representative Brawley said you already have certain authority, so you don't need us. But those areas where you might need us to make some adjustments, what's going to happen? Because by the time we meet, you'll be in the school year. And that's not necessarily for the superintendent, but for us, those of us who are going to be making certain decisions on behalf of the superintendent.
Thank you, Representative Alexander. That is, in follow-up to what you said there, I know that you're kind of compiling a list of some different things that we're going to need to talk about as a General Assembly in September. And I think maybe this committee would like the opportunity to talk about those ahead of time and either recommend that the General Assembly adopt these changes or make changes to them. What time frame are you looking at in order so that we can schedule our follow-up meeting?
2 weeks. So we're at July, late July. We're
Yeah.
about 2 weeks away from the beginning of August. I would say, when,
We have that report due on August 1st, so I would
There-
recommend
yeah.
it after that.
Katie reminds me, there's a report that we have due to the General Assembly, August 1st. So by then, we should have a really good list prepared for you and any numbers. And hopefully, by then, we'll be close to having district plans approved and really, I don't want Dr. Mathis to leave me, but
We can't
2 to
see
3
that
weeks.
smile.
2 to 3 weeks, yes. Yes. So 1st of August, yeah.
So would the will of the committee be, if the report is due August 1st, which is a Saturday, would the will of the committee be to maybe meet again on Tuesday, August 4th?
You need something like that. You're on vacation.
That's Monday is EOC that we're already here for. So I was. Okay, so do we want to tentatively say, and we'll have staff follow up with us, that we'll try to maybe meet again August 4th? And you can kind of review that plan or that report that you gave. And then hopefully we can kind of finalize our work that needs to be done before the General Assembly reconvenes in September,
Thank you.
okay?
And everybody
Any
wear
other-
your mask so we can all get back to school 5 days a week.
Yeah, really. Are there any other comments from any of my committee members? Yes, Chair.
I would just like to say that we appreciate what you and your staff have done and continue to do. We know that you have an awesome job, and, you know, there's an old saying, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. And I think that's the dilemma we're in. But I know that you and everybody that is involved with you is putting the health and the safety of not only our students, but our teachers also. And I know that our teachers across the state are very frustrated, as well as our parents, because I know that they're not really sure. I commend you on your accelerator ed that you did. I watched every one of those. I Zoomed with you and watched every one of those, and I know that they came out with some great guidelines and that kind of thing. But implementation and the reality that we're in makes it that much more difficult sometimes for everybody. But I know that you feel, as we do on this panel, our teachers need to feel how important that they are. And I know that there's situations out there where they have not felt that way lately. And I know that even in my own district, I have teachers who have cancer, who've had bone marrow treatments and all of that. So I know that they're going through a lot and everything. So I think it's together that we're going to be successful for our children in this state. So thank you again for what you and your staff have done. And we want to thank all those teachers out there that are very, you know, antsy now about what they're going to do. Those who cried the other day when the kids went back, little ones for KRA to get their KRA. I had teachers who told me they cried with those little ones with masks on. So we feel all of that, and together as a state, we need to continue to feel that so that we fulfill the education promise for every child out there. So thank you again. We've all been through a lot, and we're all going to continue to go through a lot. But one day, this will be over, and we'll look back and know that we learned a lot along the way. So thank you.
I appreciate the manner that y'all held this
Yes.
discussion today. Thank you.
By all means, thank you, Superintendent. Thank the committee members. We want to thank the media for being with us today, and the staff, and all of those listening. Together, we will get through this. We are all in this together. If we keep hope and courage, we'll build confidence, and we will accomplish this. But it all starts with kindness. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?